Going on, everybody? This is the Watchers, and tonight we have a Horror Watchers episode, and one that I have been very excited to bring you. So I'm going to play our intro so that we can move on without further ado and introduce the very esteemed guests that I can't wait to speak with tonight. And this is Drew and JC with an awesome guest, and that is Frank Farel. And I'm going to let him introduce himself to everybody. And from there, we're going to pick his brain about his years in the filmmaking business. Uh, Thank you for coming on with us tonight, Frank.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys. And let's see. It's Frank Farel for posterity's sake.
Farel.
Farel. Yeah, everybody gets it wrong. It's not a problem. As you said, I'm primarily known as a producer of Spookies, or at least the primary producer of Spookies. I'm also a co-producer of the film Street Trash, which is certainly a cult favorite for years. And the fact is, my whole life and career have taken an upward swing in the past few years since the release of Spookies on Blu-ray, which is its first video release in the U.S. in decades. And so now I have fans all over the world I never knew that existed, and things have been going very well in terms of that. And I've got a sort of delayed recognition that I didn't have.
It's 10 o'clock
During those years when we made Spookies.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's well deserved. As a fan of the genre of films that you have worked in, I can say with uncertainty that, in particular, Street Trash has been one of, if not my favorite movies since the very first time that I watched it.
It's been a worldwide favorite for many decades now, and it only seems to. I mean, it's really interesting because. Some films, like, they'll surge a little bit, and they'll sort of become known and be popular for a few years, and they'll fade a little into the background. And Street Trash just keeps going. It gets new fans all the time. It's still very offensive to many people, which is something I can brag about. That we did something. I mean, at the time, we knew we were sort of doing something that would be considered extreme, but I'm really astounded that people are still equally. Offended, and that and well, the thing is, that's great now is they're offended by very different things in many cases.
Yeah, I can't really imagine what people would have been offended by when this first released. I was
You can't.
I think times have changed. I'm not sure. Maybe I was very fresh in the world as a newborn, but I believe JC probably wasn't even alive yet when had come out. So I know like the landscape has changed as far as what people really get offended by these days, and how
understand that we made Street Trash realizing that when we went to the ratings board, they would probably give us an X rating. Right. We were basically, these bodies were melting and fluid was gushing all over the place. But if you think about it, the way we also did it very deliberately is there's all kinds of colors to the actual melt of people. And red is really not one of them that's prominent. So technically it's not that kind of a splatter film. There's very little blood. It's mostly just internal organs and stuff melting in various colors. But apparently that still would have been worth an X rating at the time. So we went unrated, and it was a very different situation with Spookies, which was we wanted to make a film that would get an R rating, and our backer, who was a major obstacle in making the film, he didn't want that. He wanted a PG rating. He he was sort of known as the king of the video nasties and the video nasty craze of the 80s in Britain, where they were censoring videos all over the place. And so he wanted us to make a PG film. Somehow the film, when it got released in an altered version that we, did not really get a chance to complete, it got an R rating, and I have still never determined why.
Yeah. So let's talk about that for a minute, as far as Spookies go, because that's not even the title of the movie that you had originally created.
Yeah. The thing is, I mean, years ago, nobody knew what the hell went on, and every time somebody would review it, they give a different version of what they thought the events were that led to why it's such a bizarrely disconnected and zigzagging film. And what really happened is that when the Blu-ray came out, there's a feature-length documentary on it, won a Rondo Award. It it really has helped to clear that up, and a lot of people have sort of sent a lot of sympathy my way since that came out with the film itself, and that it just, they saw that we went down this really difficult path dealing with a financier who was, I don't even know how to describe it. I'm not a rational human being.
Yeah. Well, if this was the guy who was primarily altering movies in the UK to classify them as video nasties,
well, he was trying not to. He wanted to release the uncut versions because those are the ones that would probably make him more money. But the authorities there were really censoring this stuff. I mean, there was a big outcry about it. Oh, it's juvenile delinquency and it's making people call. It's basically that it's having a bad influence on people and will result in crimes and murder.
Right. To this day, the video nasties in that area of the world are still in some cases censored. I believe that there were boutique labels that were still being challenged.
It varies from country to country. So, I mean, some European countries have some pretty wide open laws in terms, they're very lax with censorship still, and others like the UK, they're still, they're still likely to keep an eye on things more closely. Even though I've seen some fairly bloody and explicit British horror films in recent years too.
Yeah, it's good that label's finally kind of coming off of stuff. But when I first got back into collecting a few years ago, because I had taken a break with my physical media, I wanted to start by collecting like everything that was ever classified as a video nasty. And
there's a couple of books out on just that subject.
Yeah. So that's like a really interesting topic, just by itself. But so when filming Spookies, then for anybody that hasn't seen that documentary that I believe is on the Vinegar Syndrome release of the Blu-ray as a special feature. So what essentially occurred that created the dysfunction while making the movie? I believe the Wikipedia says that there's essentially two films here that were spliced together.
It was one film that was completed. The climactic scenes involved optical effects that a member of our production was supposed to do. We were just under constant ridiculous pressure and treated so poorly and abused and insulted every day. And eventually my partner, who had just come back from like 3 weeks out of the cutting room with the flu, came back in and found that the producer, with his impatience, had recut major scenes in the film, and he flipped out. There was a big fight, and we quit before we could be fired.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's always the way to go. Make it rain on your way out.
I poured a year of my life into the thing, and I don't know what to say. I mean, to tell the truth, I mean, my partners who co-directed the film, I mean, especially my partner Thomas Doran specifically, who I continued to work with years after Spookies. He was just totally defeated. I mean, he was a guy I really respected. He was creatively just, I thought, brilliant, and I mean, Spookies gives no idea of what his real abilities and talent was, but I mean, the whole thing happened so quickly that I barely, I sort of walked in after the screaming was finishing, and and I had to support my partners, but I I mean, to tell the truth, I've thought about it, and looking back at it like now over the years, the smart thing to do, if there had been any smartness involved, would have probably been for me to sort of take the backer's side and pretend that I completely agreed with him, and that, and essentially play a game and, work supposedly, against my partners to some degree, just to get his confidence back.
Yeah, then that might have allowed you to kind of keep some kind of control on what the final product of the movie may have been.
The fact is also he was conned by, he was looking for someone to complete the special effects, couldn't, screened it for a woman who was somewhat prominent in the porn industry back in the 80s. And she somehow convinced him to make essentially another movie, to get new scenes, create a framing story, cut down the other scenes. And it was obviously, especially looking at the cut of the way she cut the film, it was really done to get her a slightly larger percentage of the running time and claim a co-directing credit.
Yeah, and she did that under a pseudonym, right?
No. Well, she did. Her pseudonym or pseudonym was she was a porn star from the mid to 80s into the 90s, I think. And the Jeannie Joseph was her name as a supposed filmmaker. And there was literally no reason to do any additional scenes for the film. He was trying to avoid spending tens of thousands of dollars to do these climactic optical effects, and ultimately he wound up spending, from what I've heard, I don't know the accuracy of it, but another $100,000 to $150,000 to shoot entirely new scenes. Although I've heard estimates that it was like maybe double that. I have no way of knowing. I have lots of rumors to go on.
Yeah. So that specifically, I believe, was kind of the front and back end of the finished product, if any of those rumors are correct. And if you look at even just on the Wikipedia, where anybody can write anything, they kind of have that detailed as well.
That has not been updated since the Blu-ray came out in 2020. So it really is not that accurate at this point. The initial entry on there basically gave the same story that people seem to continue to repeat about it. It was just two films that were put together. It wasn't quite like that.
Yeah, I mean, even with the disjointed editing. Okay, so I rewatched Spookies today in preparation for this, and it remains my favorite Vinegar Syndrome release that I have ever had. It was a blind buy before I picked it up from Vinegar Syndrome. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you've seen what the going rate on the aftermarket slip is for that thing, but
yes, I have. I saw it literally 2 days after their release of the disc. Right, I had done it. Well, actually, the actual release date, myself and people associated with the film went and did a signing, and a lot of people showed up, and a few people would buy multiple copies. 2 days later, they were on sale on eBay.
Yeah, and it's long out of print now. The slip, not the film. And
right.
It's one of the most expensive and sought after of the Vinegar Syndrome slips. And I don't know how that makes you feel as one of the.
I have very mixed feelings about that. I mean, I understand. I mean, the thing is that whole business, because the number of people buying discs these days has gotten smaller and smaller. But the real collectors, the people who care, the collectors and film lovers will go out of their way to obtain, as you know, different versions, different releases, anything connected to something that they happen to like. And, and it's become a boutique business. It's sort of like, you're buying very specialized product at a higher than might be normal price to get something that's maybe in a limited edition or whatever. And I think in a sense, I find that kind of frustrating that it's like, in some cases, it's like, when they do a limited edition of something like that, it's only to basically increase the value. And the collector's value is essentially also, and this is another semi-objection I have, is that there are a certain percentage of people who will go out and buy, as with certain other things, they'll buy things and then they want to wait 5 to 10 years and grab a profit off of it.
Oh yeah, that's definitely something that's been plaguing physical media, especially since the boutique labels have caught on over the last few years.
Right.
It's pretty bad, but as long as you stay on top of it, and generally you're able to avoid having to deal with those scalpings and stuff. But
Yeah, no,
you
if
know,
you're a Wear fan, and to tell the truth, the most hardcore collectors usually are very aware and will be trying to maximize their returns on whatever they're investing in this. So but the thing is, I understand a big reason why this has happened is simply because as the markets become more specialized, people are willing to spend more money if necessary, and these labels, because they're not dealing in like the mainstream or the mass market necessarily, even though they do get distribution in a lot of in some of the last like uh, Walmart and
yeah,
Target and these places, who are like among the only places that are actually selling new movies on disc in stores. Uh, but the point is, it's by doing this, they're making enough money to keep doing this and to keep this business going. Because if they were relying on the general public, it would not be the same.
yeah. I believe Shout and Scream Factory have an exclusive media deal now with Walmart that they inked last year, and that's why you're seeing a lot of increase of their stuff and exclusive steelbooks. I saw your Return of the Living Dead was just announced as a Walmart exclusive today.
Oh, really?
Um,
Wow.
yeah. Um, so yeah, I keep up on that, and I've been talking to a few of the labels, and the gentleman that runs Synapse has gotten back to me about coming on and chatting about the show. And one of the things that I'm looking forward to discussing with him is the release of Street Trash and when we're going to get a 4K release of it. Do
They did a
you?
really nice job with that, and I've actually heard that a 4K release is, they've at least discussed it and have plans for it.
Yeah, it's been one of the long rumored things since I got back into it. And I remember I had just purchased their Street Trash Blu-ray, and then I started to read about the 4K, and I'm like, oh man, isn't that just kind of the crux of collecting? That as soon as
Well,
you
that's
have this,
you can't worry about that. You can't worry about that. It's just it's like when you buy the latest piece of equipment that you want, and like a week later the new model comes out. It's just impossible to avoid in many cases.
yeah, and I'm not one to get upset about a 4K upgrade, but I am curious, like the work they did on that movie is superb. Like I don't know how much better it could look in a 4K.
I'm really the Street Trash and Spookies restorations. I am so impressed at how beautiful they look. I mean, to me, like Street Trash looks as clear as when we were watching the original 35 millimeter print that we were editing on the Moviola table, and and seeing it like a foot and a half from your face or whatever. It was really very intense compared to seeing it on a 35 millimeter screen. But the film now looks. I mean, all the color is just nice and bold, and I have no complaints. And sometimes I see a film that's restored or put on disc, and it doesn't look like it's been upgraded in any way. Sometimes it's pretty poor on every level.
Yeah, I think Synapse in particular does an amazing job, and obviously Vinegar Syndrome really upped their game over the last couple of years too. Once they started getting into 4Ks, but surprisingly, even the streaming on Tubi looked very crisp today because
Yeah.
uh, I was downstairs and I introduced these movies to a friend of mine who had never seen them, and I watched them downstairs on one of my 4Ks. That's a Roku, and even on the Roku on Tubi of all things, which is pretty famous for kind of having lower quality prints of films. It
They
looked
tend to like be considerably lower quality. But that's, to tell the truth, high definition video is it's good enough so that you can still stream at that lower quality, and it can look pretty damn good most of the time, I think.
yeah. So anybody listening, if you haven't seen these movies yet and you don't want to invest in a blind buy boutique disc, they are currently on Tubi and I believe on Shutter as well.
Um,
But
I, on Shudder. Shudder was the this channel that premiered it when it started streaming, and they also did that sort of in conjunction with the Joe Bob Last Drive-In episode that was done for for Spookies. Although they did Street Trash also previously.
Yeah, right. So you are. Did you tell me that you were from New Jersey?
No, I did not.
Was it New Jersey or New York or somewhere?
I live in Upper New York State at the moment. I grew up in Lower New York State in Westchester County, above New York City. I lived for years in New York City and Manhattan and Brooklyn. But I'd say New York primarily. I've never lived in New Jersey.
Okay. Well, I was just curious because I knew it was around that general area, not in Pennsylvania. How did you end up in Dawn of the Dead?
Myself and one of my spooky partners, Brendan Faulkner, who was the co-director. I'm trying to remember where we heard about it. It was through someone we knew. There was also my friend and the producer of Street Trash, Roy Frumkis, was shooting a documentary on George Romero. So he was going, in fact, that's how we heard about it. I know that I'm thinking of it. He was going up there to shoot the stuff, on the set stuff for Dawn of the Dead. And we heard that they were looking for zombie extras for some scenes. And so we drove up there in a blizzard, 12 hours on the road without being able to see the road. And it was great. It was fantastic. It was like, I'm so glad that's like one of the things that I was really happy about with in the earlier part of my career. Plus, I didn't know at the time what a legend Dawn would become for with such a fan base that it still has.
Yeah, it's still huge just in general. However, where we grew up, primarily, it's even above legendary status, and
Really?
we grew up right outside of Pittsburgh, and so I would often go to the Monroeville Mall. And now, of course, this was after renovations, so
Right.
you couldn't see everything in the original form, but we would go to the Monroeville Mall on weekends, and we would hit up this store, Suncoast, to buy movies, and then we would go up to the area. Now the fountain is gone, but we would retrace all the steps, and this was before they even started doing the zombie museum, which I guess are the ones who host Living Dead Weekend, which last year annoyed me because you were announced as being part of it, and then
I had until further notice been banned from the Living Dead Weekend.
And you never got a reason why for that?
Oh, I know why. And I'm not going to go into it in detail now, but one of the organizers had a grudge against me for something I said in an online post in like 2019. After he said he hated Street Trash, and I just sort of responded to it, not in an especially nasty way or anything. And he decided, oh well, this guy and this was after he knew I was invited. After they had made a banner for me, it was like, oh well, no, you're not invited. And I tried to get a hold of him. I tried to reason with him. I went through the other organizers, and no dice. I couldn't rectify the stupid thing.
Yeah,
I'm one of the few zombies that's never been to one of those conventions.
Yeah, that's unfortunate because one of those reasons. I remember when you had originally posted it, that actually got me very excited, and I was ready to hit the convention. And I haven't been to one in many years at this point because right. I mean, I did grow up in that area, and I did do the convention scene when I was in high school, and all of those guys and gals I've met, I've had the autographs, I've done that, and so it kind of quit being new to me. So when you had originally posted about that, I was like, all right, now we're cooking with grease. I'm very excited. And then I didn't go after they pulled you. And I don't
do that. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know if any of them will ever hear this or not, but I think it's time to put that aside and get Frank back on the panel.
I tell the truth, I just don't understand. It was a trivial thing. I don't understand why anyone would hold a grudge over it. It gets them nothing, and it obviously gets me even less.
Right. So Yeah, no, that was just really annoying, and I 100% actually have not even considered going back since I had seen that. But yeah, but where we grew up, man, it was we were right, like, kind of almost in between Evans City, where Night of the Living Dead was filmed, and then Monroeville, where obviously a lot of Dawn was. And I live out a little further now, towards like the central area, but obviously that they use Johnstown a lot while filming as well.
Right.
So yeah, Dawn of the Dead holds a very special place in my heart.
Yeah, well, me too. I mean, having been on it, having hung out with George and Ken Faree, and I mean, it was really like an amazing thing to be able to look back on after especially after the film just seemed to every year become more well known. And I mean, it was re-released theatrically just this past few months again.
Yeah, yeah. It's a real bummer that the rights for that movie is held up the way it is, because I mean they did put out with Second Sight one of the best 4K transfers I've ever seen, but it's unfortunate that you have to import the movie to even get it on disc anymore.
Is that true? Because I have some older Blu-rays.
Yeah,
But...
yeah, those Blu-rays in the aftermarket go for a little less now, because that Second Sight 4K restoration is available, and kind of a one of the most beautiful and crisp things that I've ever seen. But a lot of people will still like pay pretty good money for those. Even the DVD, it
right,
still goes for a lot, because
I know somebody just recently did a fan cut called the Monroeville cut from the three different versions, using as much footage as they could. And I'm told, I mean, and that was actually done previously by somebody else, but I'm told this cut is like really very good.
I have mixed feelings on that. I know who you're talking about.
Really, I haven't seen this new cut, but I also I feel like the Dario Argento cut for me doesn't really work at all. It kills all the suspense in the movie. It's just it's moving.
Yeah, I I can I can take a filmmaker stance on their movie. Like the Argento one, obviously different cut versus Romero's, but it's hard for me to put like Romero or Argento on my shelf and then try to justify a bootlegger who is trying to edit a film and stake a claim on it. And so I mean it is interesting to get fan edits, but I feel like it's less of a fan edit and more of a...
There are 3 Spookies fan edits.
Oh, really?
One of them just was released a few months ago. I have yet to watch it.
But yeah, that's interesting. And but on that note, something else that you post a lot about on social media was when you would come across new releases and then find out that oh, this is actually a street trash bootleg. And
there's so many bootlegs of so many films from all over the world, and to me it's amazing that they're still being spit out all over the place. Films that are like easily available or legally available, bootleggers will still grab them and resell them.
Yeah. And does that bug you or kind of eat you up when you see something like a street trash or Spookies?
To tell the truth, that at this stage it's I'm more interested in, because what's happened really is that the renewed popularity in Spookies has brought me a chance to make some more films, it looks like. So I am, as far as I'm concerned, anything I've done that gets more people to see it, that gets more copies of it out there, is just good for me at this point.
Yeah, that's an honest and fresh take too. All of the exposure certainly helps.
It's like, plus, I mean, film pirating has always gone on. It will continue to go on. There was actually, an effort by the FBI a few years ago to do something about it. They seem to have given up on that.
Yeah. Well, the individual who put out that Monroeville Mall cut was sued by Gene Simmons for
really?
putting out Kiss stuff, and he paid, I believe, like $150,000 or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of filmmakers have taken a pretty hard stance on that guy, and that's
Yeah,
why.
I mean, truth, when somebody's motivation is primarily profit, I really frown upon that. I don't. I see. I know people who do like film preservation and are frequently involved in projects that they're making no personal profit on. And maybe they're doing some crowdfunding or something, but they'll put money into just trying to get a film restored to look halfway decent, and they're not worried. They're not looking at that profit. They're looking at like a film they like that's suddenly available in a nice version.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I think maybe the despecialized Star Wars have been something that I've always been interested in trying to pick up as far as a fan edit goes. But even
Right.
then, you're watching like somebody who had nothing to do with this movie.
No, you're just watching. And in most cases, it's usually done because somebody finds something lacking with the film as released, so they've decided to correct it into what they think is a better way. So, and I can respect that on a private level, and I'm okay with that, even if it's just something that people do and exchange, amongst film collectors and fans and stuff. But if somebody's out there touting it and saying, "Oh yeah, here's the price," that's that to me is a little bit, it's also a very suable action, and the fact is nowadays though that very few people are being sued for stuff like that.
Yeah, well, Gene Simmons is one that'll still call his lawyer. He'll get that cease and desist out right away. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's not dissimilar to JC and I also grew up like really big fans of pro wrestling, and there used to be tape trading in the pro wrestling fandom where people would pirate tapes and then just not sell them, but trade with people from other territories and parts of the world.
In any field of collectibles, there's like, it really depends on, I mean, there's a mainstream interest in most things, right? But there's also the core audience. I mean, and horror fans, and to tell the truth, this is something that is, I think, more and more true as time goes by, is simply the horror fans are the number one passionate, involved film fans who will go out of their way to see something or to own something or to share it with other people or to help find it or whatever it is. And I can't think at this point. I mean, there are other films and other genres that have fans, but there's not this unity that I see with horror fans.
No, it's definitely we're a unique group of people for sure. It's I think it's one of the reasons that really drives the boutiques. They are starting to kind of dip into a little more mainstream stuff. It is nice that like a 4K of I don't know, Showgirls now exists, but like,
right, but they did that because there's an association. That's a film that's sort of recognized for its badness in many ways, and it's developed a bit of a following for that reason alone. So they're not just looking at horror, but they're looking at anything that sort of borders on exploitation, on sensationalism, on erotica, whatever they want to feel is saleable. And I'm glad that they've expanded. They just like Vinegar Syndrome in the past couple of years has started releasing films from Hong Kong that I'm familiar with for years, but they're making an effort to get them over here and give some restoration work to them, things like that. It's it's nice to still see that going on.
Yeah, Ebola syndrome is one that comes to mind for me that I saw for the first time because of the 4K from Vinegar Syndrome. That's one of the what is it, the category 3s or 9s? I can't remember what the term. Yeah. That movie was something.
That's the kind of film that I think someone who has no familiarity with films like that from Asia and Hong Kong, I'm not even sure how they would react to it.
Yeah, that's the movie I want to show people and have wanted to show people, but I don't know anyone that would respond well to it.
Well, I mean, you realize it's intended to be a comedy. It's intended to be a black comedy, and Anthony Wong, who stars in it, is one of my favorite Hong Kong actors. He's really done some very fine dramatic work over there, but he's also, especially in like the 90s, he would take any job for anybody for, as long as he got paid, I guess, whatever his rate was. And he's in some awful films. And then the same year he's in some wonderful films.
Yeah. I love that guy, and I think he's actually still like relatively young too. Last time I
He's
checked,
still
like
working. Yeah,
yeah,
he's definitely working, and he's been acting over there since the 80s, as far as I know.
yeah, so that's definitely something. Anybody listening, if you haven't seen Vinegar Syndrome, please see it and reach out and let us know. And the effects in that movie are great. But also, when I had rewatched your films today with my friend, one of the things that he said, and he went to some type of art school and is an artist, and he loved the effects in those movies and couldn't stop talking about how impressed he was with them. And I was curious if you had any say in either of the
Well,
films as far as
have say, but I was there, watching things progress, keeping an eye on everything. Street Trash, the first day that we shot effects, we had trouble with them because we really didn't have much time to test or to figure out different ways to do things. So our first immediate problem was that the stuff was supposed to be melting out of somebody, and it wasn't liquid enough, and it was not really going at the rate that was needed. So things had to be rethought out. New combinations of substances had to be come up with to give it a viscosity and to still get it to flow.
yeah, and that movie in particular, with all of the melting and the exploding and just kind of the way that you that the characters react when they start to experience the side effects of taking that drink, it's different every time too. So it didn't even seem like it would be something like if you ran into an issue and solved it on this person melting, it
Right.
wouldn't help when you get to that next sequence when you have to inflate and explode somebody.
No, I know what you're saying. There seem to be a lot of films that when they have a series of killings throughout, they're almost identical in some cases.
Yeah, and you not only do you not get that in honestly either Spookies or Street Trash, but the the amount of like in camera effects I think is impressive even by today's standards,
Well,
or
I
even
mean,
especially.
both films, all practical effects, a little bit of optical work, but practical effects primarily.
Yeah, and I think one of the reviews that I had seen for Spookies was that they called it like a really disjointed or bad movie, but then said that they couldn't believe how brave it was to put so many rubber monsters into
I think
one
I know the
single
review you're
movie.
talking about, where it was like no one in their right mind would attempt to put this many monsters into such a low budget movie. And to tell the truth, we knew we were sort of, I mean, the problem was our backer was basically saying, here, this is the money you're going to get. You're limited here. You have to do it under, and then, but he kept demanding more and more went into it to make it saleable. And the concept, more or less from the start, originally he sort of just wanted to, ghosts and whatever running around this house with teenagers. And we thought, well, all right, we already knew some effects and makeup people that were starting off their careers, and we wanted to, we figured, all right, we're fans, we're big monster fans. What in every monster movie, what's the biggest problem? Well, there's not enough of the monsters. All right, well, let's overdo it with the monsters this time. The real issue now with the movie is that all those monster scenes are probably 30, maybe 50 to 30% of what they were originally intended to be in terms of what happens. Stuff, especially like the spider lady scene, was far longer, lots of other shots, entire effects pieces that were not shown in the final version.
And that's crazy to me because I feel
It
like
is.
that looked really good still when in that final product. So if you're telling me that there's all of this other stuff that wasn't even included in that final cut, now you're kind of like blowing my
You look
mind.
at that
Like I want
spider
to see
scene,
it.
as you look at the spider scene, as it gets to the guy gets attached to the web, and the woman's there talking to him and all this shit. The cuts come boom, boom, boom. It's cut like a
Yeah.
trailer. It happens so fast. It was originally a little, more atmosphere. Well, it was atmospheric still, I guess, but it was a little. It was more designed to take a little time. Things happen. The woman grows into an entire enormous spider. You see at one point a spider about this big jumps on the guy, right?
Yeah.
Originally, there was a shot or a couple of shots of the spider lady with these boxes on either side of her that like open up, their doors open, and these two spiders, come out. Gone. I have no idea what the purpose of that was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. Now, because rewatching it today, I was impressed by what I saw, and now I'm sitting here like kind of disappointed I didn't see more of it. But another kind of burning question that I have for you is, how did you end up getting involved in the film business? And like when you started your career, did you ever imagine that you would have the type of cameo that you had in Street Trash?
Well, no one ever imagines that.
Like it's that. I mean, best cameo of anyone.
I grew up with fairly, strict, straight-laced Catholic parents who never found out about that scene that I did in Street Trash. If they had, I probably would have been attending, their funerals from shock shortly thereafter. But no, I never expected that. There's several articles online that will have titles like the 10 best castration scenes ever done, and I'm usually one of them. So how many people can say that?
I can't imagine a lot, and there's not many that I would put, if any, above it, especially with the chaos that ensues after the initial castration, where you're passing it around like a football, and then you dive into the puddle.
Right.
It's very well done, very comical, and I mean that's
probably one of the reasons that we would have gotten an X rating. Is that scene especially took it a little bit further than probably expected. But at the same time, I think the scene is even if it's obscene, it's still pretty much harmless fun.
Yeah, but I think that's what I would describe the entire film is just this harmless fun that like I can't imagine somebody being offended because there's not only, first of all, it's very fun, and you have like this plethora of characters in these settings that are genuinely fun to watch and easy to root for or fun to hate.
I'm glad you felt that way, because when I see Spookies certainly has gotten far more than its share of bad reviews than Street Trash has. But Street Trash has also gotten many negative reviews. And a lot of times when I'll see a negative review of Street Trash, it'll say, "Oh, photography is terrible. The acting is terrible. The special effects are terrible." It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Almost all those things are superior for this kind of a movie, for this budget. I feel really proud of what we did on Street Trash. And I'm not frustrated the way I am with Spookies, where everything, virtually every shot, every cut was rethought by somebody else. And in Street Trash, I was part of the process from beginning to end. I mean, I saw endless cuts of the film as we went through it, and my suggestions were taken into account. Yeah, and I felt like I really had the input I wanted, whereas with Spookies, we ultimately our input was removed.
Yeah, and you can absolutely see the differences in those for that reason. I think you definitely have like I said, just this really fun group of people that even when you present a villain or something like in Street Trash with Wizzy, right? So like clearly.
The guy who played Wizzy was Phil Perlman, who was the manager of the wrecking yard that we were working with, right? His first acting ever, right? And I think his performance is like worthy of somebody who's been acting for 30 years. He's so fucking good. He's got range. He's a fucking scumbag, but he's also got scenes where he's sympathetic and you sort of feel sorry for him. And it's like, I really was so impressed by him.
Yeah, and then by the time he grabs the bottle and starts drinking out of it, you're like, for a second, I'm like, man, no, don't let him drink that. But at like the beginning of the movie, he's such like a charismatically almost evil person where like,
Oh,
okay, no,
totally
I
evil.
can see it.
He's
Yeah.
that's it. He's evil, but he's charismatic nonetheless.
Right. Yeah. And he's one that is an impressive standout as well. But just top to bottom with all of the characters, like everybody,
Yeah.
it's not one note.
We had certain people in mind that we wanted to use from the start, but most of the casting was open casting. People just came in, and we were looking for people that were unusual, that either in appearance or the way they came across, their behavior. And I think we achieved that. In its own way, it's a freak show. And Lloyd Kaufman has accused us of ripping off the Trauma style. But when Street Trash was being made, there were barely any of the Trauma movies that people think of. I think they had just released maybe The Toxic Avenger around that time. None of us had ever seen it. We were not intending to steal anybody's anything. We used a couple of people in our cast that Trauma had used, but that's only because they walked into our casting room.
Right. That's one of the things I did want to bring up. Not that he had accused you of that, but because when you were talking about how the things that you saw in those reviews that were negative were actually what your film excelled at, I was gonna say, like, really the best comparison would be to put Street Trash up against a Trauma movie, something like The Toxic Avenger, or maybe closer to Nuke 'Em High. But Nuke 'Em High, I think, absolutely.
Street Trash had a bigger budget than almost any Trauma movie of that sort that I can think of, and the director had a lot of freedom because his dad was putting the financing together. It was sort of a situation that was far more likely to work than my Spookies situation. But again, it's like I feel like the Trauma movies are sort of, I mean, they've got their following. They're still like, a huge fan base for Trauma, but their films are definitely more haphazard, more cost cutting, more designed to be cheap, quick, and schlocky intentionally.
Right. Yeah. No. For that reason, I love them too. Trauma is
right, but I think the goals are different. In Street Trash, yeah, I mean, you could describe it as schlock, but that almost has more to do with it's because it's of all the elements that are in it. It's automatically schlock, but it's not intentional schlock. And I think there's even a certain amount of heart to it.
No, there's an incredible amount of heart. Like even just the relationship with Freddie and his brother. His name's escaping me right now. But yeah, like just the plots and the subplots that are all involved, I think are something that is a cut above just about anything else in the genre.
That was the thing too. We knew we were making something that because the melts might be so distasteful to some people that it was going to be, I don't know, it was going to be automatically poorly regarded by some people. So I think, you sort of go into it. All right, we realized this from the beginning, and we just played into that in a large measure in terms of how far we'd go, and our actors would improvise all the time. There's so much improvised swearing in the film that at some point the editor said, "All right, I counted something like 217 fucks, and then I stopped."
It's a unique number. You'd think they might have quit at 200, but they went to 17.
It was just like, we didn't tell the actors, don't do this, don't do that. We let them, and again, this is something that not the average low budget film has the luxury of doing. In a lot of cases, you do like 2 or 3 takes and then you're on to your next shot, and there's not time to experiment or try and let the actors have their way. So I think a lot of those aspects helped the film to rise, above what it might have if our shooting had been more restricted.
I'm gonna talk for the first time in 48 minutes.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I let Drew just run with it, but I just wanted to say, so the first time I saw Street Trash, I absolutely fell in love with it. I mean, I started watching it laying down, and by halfway through the movie, I was sitting up so focused on it. And for me, there are 2 characters in the movie that are kind of juxtaposed, but they make me feel just as dirty and greasy, and that's Bill the cop and Frank.
Right, but keep in mind that was part of Roy Frumkus in writing the script. I mean, he from the start was looking to do something where, all right, even the good guys are scumbags in one way or another. And and the only really sympathetic characters are characters like what's his name? Freddie's brother, whose name I can't remember now.
Is it Kevin?
Kevin, yes, Kevin,
yeah.
and Cindy, the the woman who works at the station there. They're relatively sympathetic characters, but they're about the only ones. There might be a couple of other minor characters.
Yeah. Was naming oh wait. Never mind. Yeah. Was naming Frank something that you did because it was your name, or is that just because that's a common name?
Roy just wrote that. I mean, he may have. It might have been because he thought of me. It might have been because we all knew lots of Franks.
Yeah. And then on the Bronson and Bill the Cop, man, like that fight scene, I thought is like a cut above a lot of the fight scenes.
I know, you know why? And they worked out the choreography themselves. They sort of like figured out what they were going to do, etc. And it has a weird feel to it. I think just between the cutting and the music, it's got this like totally off kilter sort of feel to it. And and then the cop gets the knife in the back and dies, which I don't think you expect.
Yeah, well, yeah, but also that's kind of like how layered that movie is. Here's the cop, but he's been a scumbag this whole time, and you're like, well, I mean, that's.
I was waiting
really
for him to come back, and then he never comes back.
But yeah,
I love the scene. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Drew.
No, go ahead. I was just gonna say that they're.
No, I was gonna say I love the scene. The scene that I had to pause because I was laughing was when Frank comes out before he finds the body, and there's that dude over by the cars, and he stops and he's like, "Who the hell are you?"
Right. That's the guy who explodes later on.
Yeah.
Right. And that is a guy who we knew as Fat Eddie, and he was one of the workers at the yard.
Yeah. So yeah, man, there's like a lot of people that ended up in this movie that otherwise may not have even been in a film, it sounds like, and they put out like really compelling performances.
They did, and I don't know how we got so lucky because we were using a combination of experienced actors, completely inexperienced actors, and some people like Phil, for instance, he needed almost no direction. He just somehow was able to give like this performance that gave far more depth to his character than I think I expected. And in the case of Bill the cop, Bill was good, and I think Bill was effective, but he needed direction. He had never acted before. He really, he sometimes an actor doesn't even want to pay attention to the director. Other times an actor will keep insisting, please direct me. I've heard actors complain because they're not getting any directions and they don't know if this is working or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a unique trade to be in. I'm sure like everybody every project is probably filled with both of those happening at the same time.
Yeah. Well, not every supposedly higher budgeted, more professional projects supposedly have more experienced actors.
But yeah, I don't think any of them ever turn out the type of performance that you see in these kinds of movies. And I 100% have not, in either conversation that I've had with you, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass at all. Street trash. I love street trash. Like I'm planning to get a giant street trash tattoo down my thigh and leg.
If you actually do this, man, you got to get me a picture.
Yeah, I absolutely will. I'm going to have it scheduled with my artist at the end of the summer. And during Christmas break, actually, I'm trying to create this is like a Christmas gift to myself. I work at a college, so I'll get off for Christmas break and I'll go and I'll get the tattoo done, and then I'll have a month to recover from this giant leg piece that I do.
Wow.
And yeah, so that's 100% something that I am like working with somebody on right now to do. Like I will dedicate like a third of my body to this movie because of how much I love it. And
right. I even though I'm not the one getting the ink, I'm still like incredibly grateful, and I get really happy when I hear things like this. And I've seen several street trash tattoos. I saw my first Spookies tattoo last year.
Oh, cool. Yeah. I'm glad that stuff like that is happening for Spookies too, because I mean, I know that you have your issues with it and everything, but
I actually have more issues with it than anybody who has ever written a bad review of it.
Well, that says a lot that you feel that way, and it still has developed this following. And I mean, of the two, obviously, Street Trash is my absolute favorite, but I enjoy it a lot. And like I said, it is like still my favorite release that Vinegar Syndrome has put out as well.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
it seemed to have been like almost the start of their new era of more ambitious releases.
Yeah. But with all that said, do you happen to know any updates on the Street Trash remake that is currently in development?
I've been in touch off and on with Ryan Kruger, the director of Fried Barry, who's doing the Street Trash remake. He, last I heard, he was in post-production. He may have finished with it at this point. I don't know yet. I'm in touch with him on Facebook, but he hasn't said anything about finishing it. So I don't know exactly where it is at this stage. Some point this year it will certainly be out. I don't think they'll hold it to 2025, and I'm interested to see it. I mean, I know it's different. They've taken the whole premise and reworked it into different things. There are other subplots, etc., which I think was a good idea. To me, it wouldn't make sense to just do the same characters and recreate the same scenes. I'm sort of I get very frustrated when I see a movie that tries to do that takes like a famous movie. It's one thing if it's a book to begin with or it's adapted from another medium, but when it's originally a movie and then the remake is basically trying to recreate that movie to some extent, I think that's kind of corrupt, bankrupt creatively. That it's if you're going to remake something, do something with it, give something of yourself to it.
Yeah, be inspired with it. But have they shown you any dailies or anything from shooting?
The only thing I've seen is tests he did just before he did the main shoot, which I think are still posted on his Facebook.
Yeah, I remember seeing a couple of things way back when, and I just haven't heard anything about it.
A couple of years ago, actually, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm eager to see it. I hope it's good, and I would love to have my other leg tattooed in that regard as well. But
wait and see the movie first. But
cautiously optimistic on that. You said that
I have very mixed feelings about remakes. A lot of films I feel just don't need or deserve a remake. Others, would probably be make really good remakes, but nobody's thought about it yet.
Yeah. Another thing that you had mentioned was that because of Spookies' popularity, it seemed like you have some new projects going on. Are you able to discuss any of that at length yet?
I am limited in the limited sense that I will say, because I've talked about this before. I have for the past few years been working on a sequel to Spookies, but I don't even know if I can call it a sequel so much as a follow-up, because it's in no way a traditional sequel. In fact, I'm right now writing our whole promotional pitch deck for financing, which tries to make it as clear as possible that we made this film, it got fucked up, we had serious problems with it, we basically disowned it, it got finally re-released again on video after several decades, and most fans had heard of it, never seen it, and suddenly it had an enthusiastic audience that dug it and was like calling, was basically, I have people all over the world telling me they love Spookies and they want to see anything I do. So I really, if this is a moment to take advantage of, this is what I'm doing. And I think I have a script based on a story left by my late partner, Tom Doran, who passed away in 2017, and got to see none of this revival of interest in this. And I think it would have been really good for him if he had, but he wrote at one point, at various points, we thought if we wanted to make a film at this point, the easiest thing we could probably finance, even though nobody really knows, this is back before it was sort of rediscovered, would be a Spookies sequel, because at least we'd be able to say, all right, it's a sequel to something which seems to be of interest to distributors. And we had actually thought about that. And although he initially just got outraged at that idea and said, I will never, ever have anything to do with a sequel to Spookies. Until like a couple of years later, he calls me one day out of the blue and says, I wrote an outline for a sequel to Spookies. right? And the thing is, great because it has as little as possible to actually do with Spookies. There is one major character that returns. It takes place in the same town, but bear in mind the movie was called Spookies. Ultimately, the only spooks or ghosts that were supposed to be in it were towards the end of the movie, and they were all going to be optical effects that we never got to do. That's why all those new scenes got added ultimately. When making the film, I mean, I think he originally had in mind something with more ghosts, but we wanted to just do a monster movie, and we thought, all right, what we need to do is as many monsters as we can afford and squeeze in, and they have to just keep coming, and they have to be something that nobody has seen in every other movie that that they're very familiar in some way. And I think that's the one thing I feel that still shines through is that we did that, and it still does convey to fans, and that's really the reason that people appreciate it. Essentially, is that it's got that the re-editing and the new scenes, etc. They give it a very bizarre, more disorienting overall effect. I think that's also the reason most people don't like the film, is because it's very frustrating. Any movie that a storyline proceeds and then suddenly it stops and another storyline takes over, then that stops, the other storyline comes back, and it doesn't happen in any really very artful or clear way. It just keeps going back and forth. And I even find when watching it still, I'm frustrated that I'm following this and then suddenly it cuts to this, and the last thing we're supposed to forget about.
Yeah. When I was watching it with my friend today, he got frustrated with all that, and I was like, dude, just trust me, sit back, you're gonna love it, just go with it. Like, and I think eventually, like, I lost that battle because I think at about an hour, close to about an hour, he dipped out. But the one thing that he loved was the special effects, and he said he was going to finish it with me later.
No, it's basically, the way it is cut, it will alienate, I think, most viewers, even though many people claim to love it. And I think they love it because of all that, basically, screwed up cutting and everything else adds an extra dimension of strangeness to it. But I do still think our originally, in conceived production was, a better monster movie, and would have ultimately certainly done more for our careers.
It's 11 o'clock.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. But with all that said, I look forward to any developments on this sequel.
I will tell you, as I said, I'm working on that now. We are getting near our start of looking for financing, and we've already, spoken to some people and gotten some good reactions and some positive responses. So I'm feeling very optimistic, and to tell the truth, more optimistic than I have in my many years of constantly hunting down production funds.
Yeah, I mean, that's awesome. Just as a fan, that's great to hear. I love your work, and you have me to the very end. I will be there with bated breath, and we hit an hour, and we generally do like to end it there to not over.
I'll continue and finish my self-plug here in terms of the Spooky sequel. The Spooky sequel is conceived as, it has to be everything we feel the original Spookies did not wind up being, which means it has to be thrilling and fun, and the effects have to be far better. And it's essentially, it's a horror comedy action adventure, and it's much more ambitious than the original film.
That'll be definitely something for people to keep an eye on. I'm excited to hear everything that happens with it. Hopefully we can keep in touch. Maybe do this again sometime.
Yeah, we should because I mean, by sometime before the end of the year, I'd like to think that we might get things together and be ready to shoot a film.
Awesome. JC, do you have anything else for him?
Nope. I think you covered a lot here tonight. I'll keep my notes for next time.
I'm sorry that I bogarted it. I just I was super prepared for they say don't meet your heroes, but like this has been every time I've talked to you, it's been extremely pleasant. So I'm very grateful for that.
Well, thank you. It's been very thrilling to talk. It's always for me. I dig talking with my fans. I dig talking with people who have enthusiasm about films that I did that I thought at the time were really just going to be, something I'd have to chalk up to experience and never benefit from in any way. And to see that I can, now maybe get back, some of what, you have to understand, myself and my partners started out with such great ambitions. I think if Spookies had just been finished and released like a normal horror film at the time, it would have been easy for us to go out and say, all right, we made this film and it made some money, and yeah, it's a cheap film, but we think it's pretty good and whatever. But the film that resulted, we were so disenchanted with, we really just felt compelled to disown it. When we tried to show it to people to get money for other projects, it got laughed like out of a few offices. So
yeah, that sucks. That's a bummer.
Truly.
Do you have anything else that you want to plug or promote, or any appearances or anything like that?
I think I'm good for the moment. Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, I am appearing in October at Cinema Wasteland in Ohio.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's JC lives there, so maybe we will.
Well, I mean, Ohio's a big state. We got to see.
Well, Frank doesn't.
Oh, it's in Strongsville. It's in Strongsville. It's like 20 minutes for me.
Oh, is it? Well, the data you have.
I would be ashamed if I wasn't there.
We're going to be there. That's only a 4-hour drive for me. So.
Right, and that's what? That's like the 4th, 5th, and 6th of October, I think.
All right.
Awesome.
Well,
yeah, it is. Yep.
I'm certainly going to mark that on my calendar, and I think everybody else listening needs to also mark that, and come
hopefully
check that out.
Hopefully they won't hear I was banned from the Living Dead weekend and get rid of it.
Oh man, that's annoying still. But okay, yeah. If that's all we have, then I'll thank you again for your time, and
thank you.
Super appreciate it. Everybody listening, I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did. I will go ahead and we're going to hit our outro, and we're going to let Frank go to enjoy the rest of his evening.
And please, and when this is up and available to people, please give me a link and I'll post it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm honestly riding pretty high on adrenaline right now, so it's going to be up tonight most likely.
No problem.
Soon as we wrap up, I'm gonna have this ready to go. So everybody listening, again, if you haven't seen these movies, you can check them out on Tubi right now. They were on Shudder. And
I also recommend, and I don't know if it's available streaming at the moment, but the documentary that was on our disc is just an excellent documentary, I think, by Mike Gingold and Glenn Baisley. Mike used to be the editor of Fangoria for many years. And it really, the central conceit of the movie is it's about a film that was taken over by the financial people who didn't know what they were doing. But that's such a common story in general in the movie business. I simply think our story was an outstandingly unusual, extreme version of it.
Yeah, and that can be seen on the Vinegar Syndrome release. That
it's Blu-ray, and it has streamed. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere at the moment.
Right. Yeah. So Synapse and Vinegar Syndrome, if you want to pick the discs up, and they both have sales frequently throughout the year. So if you want to even wait for a sale to grab it, like, go ahead. You'll have many opportunities, but I recommend buying it right now. If you haven't seen it, go buy it. They look great on Tubi too. And all right, Frank, thank you so much.
I appreciate it, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Take care.
The preceding program has been brought to you by the Watchers Podcast Network. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends to help grow our network. Check us out on all social media platforms, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And until next time, thanks for your support.